Hey, this is Rich over at TVP Live with another quick tips tutorials brought to you by Adobe Photoshop Elements Custom Tutorials Group. And let's jump right in with today's poster. Want us to know how to separate the foreground subject from the background so that they could darken or change the tones of the background. Now, one way is to use the Select Subject tool. If I come up here to Select and Select Subject, the problem is you can see it looks really good from far away, but it did miss the whole shoe here, so you'd have to first make a copy and then cut the shoe out separately, because when you go to create a mask up here, the shoe is all gone. So where are you going to grab it from without having to grab it from somewhere else? I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And the other problem is, as I zoom in, you can see up here where it didn't grab part of the cap, and down here it's grabbing some of the leaves as part of the face. Now there is an adjustment for that. If I go back to Select Refine Edge, and that would be great if I could take this tool and tell it where I should include the cap. But the problem is this white background doesn't allow me to see where the cap is, so I don't know where to select. If I go like this and I select too much, it's going to start selecting part of the background. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And just to show you, if you use the adjustments here, if I smooth it, that looks good, but it's starting to get too soft, the edges. If I use the feather, that's going to feather it way too much. If I use the contrast, that looks good because it sharpens it, but now look at what happens. It's a little jaggy, and all it did is sharpen the jaggy down here. That still includes some of the leaves of the background. So I'm actually not going to use that effect. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And in this case, because the picture is so soft on the edges here, I'm going to have to go back to the old school manual way and use some elbow grease and literally physically cut it out by hand. Now what I want to do and consider is cutting out the three different sources. One is the tree in the foreground. That should be still in focus. One is the subject matter, the foreground subject, and one is the background. So in order to do that, I'm going to first right click and make a duplicate layer so we can use that duplicate later on. Now on that top layer, what I'm going to do is isolate just the tree and the foreground. With the eraser here, I'm going to grab a small eraser, something like a 10 point, and I'm going to just physically start erasing away at the background. Now when I get down here to the foreground foliage, I just want to kind of cut along here, and I can start using a larger brush here, and that takes care of that. Now we can take the polygon tool and go ahead and cut all that out. Using the left mouse button, you just click, 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 and draw a series of straight lines. Once I get to the end here, and I want to close out this polygon, I'll click here, come all the way to the edge of the photo, come back down to where they meet, where I started here. I'll double click. That closes the marching ants or the whole polygon. I'll hit delete, and that deletes that whole rest of the picture, which is exactly what we want. Now we can turn that off, and let's create another one from the lower layer. I'll right click and I'll duplicate it, and I'll lock that bottom layer and then work on that second one. And what I want to do is now isolate the foreground subject and do the exact same thing with a small eraser. Make sure it's a soft brush, something like a 10 point here, and I will cut in really close and just start cutting them out too. It's a little laborious, yes, and it takes a little bit of elbow grease, but you know what? When everything is all said and done, this will make a good picture into a great picture. Once I have the subject cut out with the soft brush, now I'll just take the polygon and we're just going to basically follow along that same line, making sure not to touch either side. And using the left mouse button, I'll just keep on clicking a series of lines until I get all the way around the whole subject. And I had started right here, so I'm going to double click. It'll close the marching ants, and basically I just encircled the whole subject. So now what I could do is right click and select inverse right here. That selects everything else but the subject in the middle. When I hit delete, It deletes everything else, and check it out. When I zoom in, there's no weird jaggies. There's nothing that's missing. It's perfectly cut exactly where we wanted it to be cut. So yes, this takes a little bit longer to do it, this method, but it's a lot more accurate, and it includes every little nuance that we want to keep. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the background back on. So now we can do our color corrections. For instance, if we want to just color correct our main subject in the foreground, we'll go to Enhance, Lighting, Brightness, Contrast, and check out what's happening here. I can make the contrast more or less just on the subject. I can make the light more or less. And this completely isolates the subject from anything else. So in our case, let's just bring the contrast down a little bit and bring the brightness up a little bit to make sure. Here's the before, after, before, after. We like that. Now let's go ahead and grab the tree and the bushes in the foreground. I'm going to hit OK, and that's this top subject. If I go to Enhance, Lighting, now we can change the color too if we want. I can go to Saturation and change the hue. Watch the trees and the foreground grass and look at what happens. See that? I'm changing it. Now in this case, there was so much green, I'm just going to take a little bit of the green out and give a little bit more of the darker colors right here, just a tad, just so that it makes it look a little bit more of a summer instead of an autumn. And hit OK. Now the biggie is the background. We'll grab this background here, and that we can toggle it on and off. And let's go ahead and go to Enhance, Color, Saturation. Let's change the hue a little bit into the summer, so you can change the mood and change the season just by simply adding or subtracting colors. So I'm bringing this, and you could do it up here individually with yellows, greens, cayennes, blues, whatever. But in this case, I'm just going to do it quickly for this video and bring it over like this. And the lightness, we can go dark or light, but the problem is look at that. That's so cool. It looks like it's a misty day. So I'm going to take this lightness and just bring it down just a tad right there, right, like -10. I'll hit OK. Now what we want to do is go to Enhance, Lighting. This is where we get a lot of good stuff. Come down here to Levels. Now with levels, you can do lots of stuff. So just working on the background, we can work on the input levels, the low ends, the darks, the mediums, or the highs. If I move the lows and bring them higher, look what happens. The value higher, it gets darker and darker. Now that's too much. Now if I move the lights down, it's going to make them brighter. So moving left is brighter, right is darker. Take the mids, this is what I think what we want to do, and we make it not brighter, but although that does kind of look kind of cool, let's make it a little darker because the poster wanted it to be a little darker. So what this is doing is it's taking the mids, which is the middle darks, and making them a little more contrasty. Here's the before, after. That's pretty good. Now let's take the highlights and make them darker, but we can't do it up here because that would mean to scroll to the right, and we can't. That's where this comes in down here is the output levels. We can take the darks and make them brighter, or take the brights, which is what we really want, and make those brights darker. See that? It's not affecting the darks, it's just affecting the lights. So we just do this until we like it. I'm not going to do it too much because then it's going to start to look fake. So I'm just going to take a little bit and go like right around there. So we're looking pretty good now. Now let's go ahead and work on the face really quick. Since the face is attached to this middle layer, I'm going to right click and make a duplicate of that whole layer. I'm going to turn off everything else so all we see is that duplicate. All we want is the face. So I can just take the polygon tool. Down here is the polygon lasso or just the lasso. I'm going to just lasso the face like this and then right click in the middle, select inverse, and then hit delete. That'll delete everything else. Now I can zoom in and erase everything by hand a lot cleaner with an eraser. We'll take the eraser. The brush down here is a soft brush. Let's do like a 5-point here, a 5-point, and come on up here and look what we're going to do here is erase everything that's not the face. And then we could take the polygon tool, and it's the lasso tool, and if I got a straight enough hand, I can just lasso this by hand. Otherwise, you have to use the lasso polygon tool and do click, click, click. And I'll let go and hit delete. That deletes the hat. Come down here, do the same thing with this bottom half. Double click at the end, closes the marching ants, hit delete, and there we go. Now, let's go ahead and take this face and we want to clean it up. So I'm going to turn the background on so it gives us a reference point of what we're doing, like this. Now I can take just the face here, and just to show you how it works, I'll go to Enhance Lighting and Brightness and Contrast. So watch just the face. I'm just working on just the face alone. See that? It doesn't affect anything else, which is exactly what we want. So first thing I want to do is soften the face. I'll bring the contrast down just a tad and then bring the brightness up. And then I'm going to give it a little bit more color. Go to Color, Adjust Color Saturation. I can lessen it or saturate it more. So let's find something that's really natural looking, right around there. That's plus 15. Now I see there's like a lot of little pits and stuff. We can fix that sort of. So what I'll do is I'll make a copy of this layer. I'll duplicate the layer. I want to soften that top layer altogether. But before I do that, I'll grab the Band-Aid tool. And what I can do is, and I can Band-Aid a lot of little areas here. See that? If the subject has blemishes, it's easy to just kind of get rid of some of those. Then I can just soften the whole face by going to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And you can see right there, the radius here was set to 5. That's obviously too much. We really want it really subtle. So I can make it like 0.6. Now here's the before, after. You see what happens? It softened the whole face, which is really nice. Now I'll hit OK. Now what happens is, yes, the face is softened, but the eyes and the lips are out of focus now. But guess what? Since we had a layer underneath, all we got to do is turn that layer on, grab an eraser. Let's make it a little bit bigger, like a 15 point. And we're just going to bring those eyes right back in to sharpness by drawing holes or erasing holes in this top layer, which shows us the original layer that we did. The copy that we originally did. Do the same thing here with the lips. The ears don't have to be fuzzed, so I'll bring this up to 25 point and bring those ears right back in there like that. Go to 10 point and bring the eyebrows back into focus, and that's looking a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Now that fix we just did might look pretty subtle, but check this out. When I turn it off and show you the original, here's the before. Look at that. After. Before. After. That's looking pretty good. When we zoom out, we like what we see. Now we do have these spots here that are still on the original other layer here. So if we wanted to darken these little spots, open holes here, what we do is go to that top layer and just erase those, and that'll show through the bottom layer. So that's all there's to it. Hey, this is Rich, calling it quits for this tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe.